Chapter 2. The Ticket. Gary woke to the smell of burnt coffee and the ping of incoming complaints. The apartment above the office was small. Bed, kitchenette, bathroom that occasionally flickered between physical and digital states depending on the building's mood. Gary had stopped questioning it months ago. The digital realm bled into everything now, turning solid walls translucent, making furniture hum with data streams. He grabbed yesterday's coffee mug, sniffed it, regretted it. Down in the office, the queue counter glowed, 1,447 complaints. Gary stopped halfway through pulling on his shirt, 1,447. Yesterday it had been 1,602. He finished dressing faster, took the elevator down. The doors opened on the office, still empty except for one translucent figure hovering near Gary's desk. "Morning," Digital Soul A said. "You actually did it." Gary checked the queue again. Still 1,447. "How many did you process?" 273. Digital Soul A's form brightened. "Turns out most rendering complaints follow predictable patterns. I wrote a script." "You wrote a script." Seemed easier than manually processing each one. Digital Soul A pulled up a holographic display. "See, if the complaint mentions pixelation, check the memory allocation. If it mentions color accuracy, verify the RGB channels. If it mentions, I've been doing this for 3 years, Gary said, "Why didn't I think of that?" "You were too busy drowning." Fair point. Gary sat at his desk, pulled up the day's priority queue. The coffee machine gurgled behind him, still working, still producing coffee that tasted like regret, but working. "I flagged something weird," Digital Soul A said. "Weird how?" "Complaint from someone named G. Patterson, filed 6 months ago. System tried to auto-resolve it but created a loop. Every time the automation runs, it generates a new complaint." Gary opened the file. Ticket 62,847. Category, upload processing. Status, recursive error. That's not good. It gets weirder. The complaint references an upload ticket that doesn't exist in the system. Probably got deleted in the Great Purge. Gary had heard about that, some system administrator's bright idea to clear old data, which had instead corrupted half the database and created more problems than it solved. Maybe. Digital Soul didn't sound convinced, but the complaint keeps regenerating, like the system is trying to tell us something. Gary took a sip of terrible coffee. "Show me the ticket reference." Digital Soul projected the complaint in midair. Gary read through technical jargon, error codes, system timestamps that didn't make sense. Then he saw it. User ID GP4227, his employee ID. Gary set down his coffee. "That's my user ID." "Yeah, I noticed that too." "G. Patterson." Gary scrolled through the complaint details. "Gary Patterson, that's me." "You filed an upload request?" Had he? Gary tried to remember. 6 months ago would have been right after his supervisor uploaded, right after everyone uploaded. He'd been drunk on bad whiskey and worse decisions, sitting in the same chair at 2 a.m., watching the queue tick up and, "I might have," Gary said. "And you don't remember?" It was a difficult time. Digital Soul flickered. "Well, your upload ticket has been stuck in a processing loop for 6 months. The system can't resolve it, can't delete it, and can't move forward. It's just spinning." Gary pulled up his personnel file, scrolled past 3 years of performance reviews, vacation time he'd never taken, dental insurance he'd never used. There, buried in a subfolder labeled Pending Transitions, upload request number 847,392, the same number as Mrs. Patterson's rendering complaint from yesterday. "That can't be a coincidence," Gary said. "The system reuses ticket numbers after resolution, except your ticket was never resolved, so..." Digital Soul A trailed off. "The system assigned it to someone else." Gary opened upload request number 847,392. The file was corrupted, fragments of data interspersed with error messages. Lines of text flickered in and out of existence, ghosting across the screen like bad reception. He squinted, trying to piece together the information. Request date, employee ID P4227, full name, Gary James Patterson. Upload type voluntary, medical clearance, psychological evaluation, manager authorization. Status, awaiting final approval, but he could make out enough. Request date, his employee ID, his full name, a checkbox marked voluntary upload. And at the bottom in red text that pulsed like a warning, approval pending, awaiting manager authorization, his supervisor's authorization, who had uploaded 6 months ago without approving his request. Gary leaned back. The chair creaked, a sound that felt impossibly loud in the empty office. 6 months. He'd been stuck in limbo for 6 months because of bureaucratic oversight. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't his entire existence. "I'm stuck," Gary said quietly. "What?" "I filed an upload request. My supervisor never approved it before she left. The system won't let me upload without approval, but there's no one left to approve it." Gary laughed. It sounded wrong in the empty office. "I'm literally stuck." Digital Soul A was silent for a moment. "That's the most bureaucratic thing I've ever heard. Welcome to customer service. Can you override it?" "If I could override the system, I wouldn't be processing complaints about virtual dogs." "So you're trapped here forever." Gary stared at the red text. Approval pending. The queue updated. 1,451 complaints. "Guess so," he said. Digital Soul A's form pulsed. "There has to be a way. Manual override. Administrative access. Something." "The only people with administrative access uploaded months ago. The system's locked down tighter than—" Gary stopped. "Wait. What?" "The human supervisor. She uploaded, but she left behind an emergency access protocol in case of system-critical failures." Gary pulled up the office directory. "She told me about it before she left, said I'd never need it, but just in case." He found the entry. "Emergency access protocol, manager override function, location unknown." "Of course," Gary muttered. "Of course what?" "The protocol exists, but she didn't document where." Gary closed the window. "Probably thought she'd have time to tell me before she uploaded. But the upload slots were limited, and she took the first one available, and Gary had been processing complaints and hadn't thought to ask." Digital Soul brightened. "But there's a protocol, which means there's a way to approve your upload. Hidden somewhere in this office, or in the system, or encoded in some file I've looked at 1,000 times without knowing." Gary rubbed his face. "This is what I get for being thorough." "Hey," Digital Soul A's form solidified slightly. "We found the problem. That's the first step." "The first step to what?" "Solving it." Gary wanted to believe that. He pulled up his upload ticket again, read through the corrupted data. Somewhere in this mess was an answer, or at least a clue to where to start looking. The coffee machine beeped. Another pot finished brewing. "You should take this," Digital Soul said. "Take what?" "Your upload ticket. Make it your priority. Process it like any other complaint." "I can't process my own." "Why not? You're customer service. I'm complaints processing. We're technically separate departments." Digital Soul pulled up a system diagram Gary had never seen before. "See, you submit it to me. I process it. I find the authorization override. You get uploaded. System resolved." "That's not how any of this works." "Neither is being the last human in the universe, but here we are." Gary checked the queue again. 1,453 complaints. He looked at his upload ticket. Approval pending. He thought about Mrs. Patterson's pixelated sunsets and Thinkerboy 1979's existential dread and every other complaint he'd processed for 3 years. All those digital souls who'd successfully uploaded, who'd moved on, who were experiencing eternity with minor glitches while Gary sat in an empty office drinking terrible coffee. He could spend the rest of his life, however long that was, processing complaints. Or he could do something about his own. "Okay," Gary said. "Okay? Okay, let's treat this like a complaint. Standard procedure." Gary pulled up his ticket management interface. Ticket 847,392, reopened. Category Upload Processing, priority high, assigned to Digital Soul A. "I accept the assignment," Digital Soul A said formally. "Investigation required. Locate emergency access protocol. Obtain manager override. Process upload authorization." "Understood." They stared at each other for a moment. "This is insane," Gary said. "Absolutely. It's never going to work." "Probably not. But it's better than nothing." "Definitely better than nothing." Gary took another sip of terrible coffee. It tasted slightly less terrible than usual. Or maybe he was just getting used to disappointment. The queue updated. 1,456 complaints. "We should probably deal with those first," Digital Soul A said. "Yeah." Gary opened the first complaint. Something about digital rain falling sideways. He could relate. "Yeah, let's deal with these first." But for the first time in months, Gary had something other than the queue to focus on. Hidden somewhere in this office or this system was the key to his upload, an emergency protocol his supervisor had left behind, a way out. All he had to do was find it. while processing 1,456 complaints and not drowning. How hard could it be? Gary muttered. Digital soul, flickered with what might have been amusement. Want me to answer that? No. Good call. Gary processed the first complaint, then the second, then the third. But in the back of his mind, he was already planning, already thinking about where his supervisor might have hidden the emergency access protocol, already wondering if this was hope or just another form of denial. The coffee machine gurgled. The queue ticked up to 1,461, and Gary got back to work. By midday, Gary had processed 47 complaints and found exactly 0 clues about the emergency protocol. He'd checked his supervisor's old desk, empty except for a coffee-stained mousepad and a sticky note that said, "Remember, upload slots limited." The note mocked him now. Limited. She'd gotten hers. Everyone had gotten theirs. Except Gary. He'd searched the file server, terabytes of old performance reviews, consistently meets expectations, never quite good enough for exceeds, policy documents dating back to when humans still outnumbered digital souls, and one folder titled Funny Cat Videos that was mysteriously password protected. He'd scoured the shared drive, checking folders labeled Important, Urgent, Read This, and one cryptically titled Q4 Core Budget 2047 Core Final V3. Nothing. He'd even asked Digital Soul A to scan for any references to emergency, protocol, override, or manager authorization in the system. 17,000 results. Most of these are just routine policy memos. Digital Soul reported, flickering through the data. System maintenance protocols, emergency contact lists, instructions for what to do if the coffee machine catches fire. Wait, what? Never mind. Happened once in 2043. They fixed the wiring. Gary rubbed his temples. A headache was forming, the kind that came from staring at screens for too long and hoping too hard. This is going to take a while, Digital Soul A said. Define a while. Weeks, maybe months. Gary's screen pinged. New priority complaint. Someone's virtual pet had started speaking Latin. Great, Gary said. He processed the Latin-speaking pet complaint. Turns out it was a feature, not a bug. Someone had accidentally enabled the Classical Languages expansion pack. He processed a complaint about clouds that smelled wrong, forwarded it to environmental rendering with a note that read simply, he processed a complaint about the concept of time feeling sticky, filed that one under existential issues, and hoped someone eventually figured out what to do with those. The queue, 1,438 complaints. Progress, sort of. Found something, Digital Soul said. Gary looked up. The protocol? No, but I found the password to the Funny Cat Videos folder. How is that helpful? It's not, but the password is not cat videos. Digital Soul paused. Want me to open it? Gary considered. His supervisor had been meticulous about documentation. If she'd password protected something and given it a deliberately misleading name. Open it, he said. The folder contained one file, emergencyprotocols.txt. Gary and Digital Soul A stared at it. That was surprisingly easy. Digital Soul said. Too easy. Gary opened the file. The text document contained a single line. Check the coffee machine. Check the what? Digital Soul A asked. Gary turned around. The coffee machine sat on the break room counter, still producing its endless supply of terrible coffee. Steam rose from the carafe. The heating element glowed orange through the glass. He walked over to it, examined it from every angle. It looked like a standard commercial coffee maker, circa 2031. Dented in one corner from when Marcus had dropped it during the 2045 Christmas party, missing the brand label that had peeled off years ago, perpetually stained with the ghosts of 10,000 pots. I don't see anything, Gary said. There has to be something. She wouldn't leave a clue that goes nowhere. Gary opened the water reservoir, empty except for water that smelled faintly of minerals and old pipes. He checked the filter basket. Standard paper filter, coffee grounds still damp from the last brew. He examined the power cord, standard plug, no hidden buttons or compartments. He lifted the machine, grunting at the weight, looked underneath. Nothing but rubber feet and a serial number stamped into the metal. AR847392 override. Wait, the serial number. Gary pulled out his phone, opened the system access terminal, entered the serial number. AR847392 override. His finger hovered over the submit button. Do it, Digital Soul said. Gary pressed submit. For a moment, nothing happened. The office hummed. The coffee machine gurgled. Somewhere in the building, a cooling fan whirred. Then, access granted, manager override enabled. The office lights flickered. Once, every screen in the room lit up simultaneously, cascading waves of green text washing across black backgrounds. The holographic displays flared bright, projecting the same message in dozens of translucent windows that floated through the air like digital butterflies. Emergency protocol activated. Administrative access granted to user GP4227. The message pulsed 3 times, then faded. The screens returned to normal. The lights steadied. "You did it," Digital Soul A said. Gary stared at his phone, at the coffee machine, at the message on every screen. "I did it. You can approve your own upload now." Gary pulled up his upload ticket. The red text had changed. Approval pending. Administrative override available. 1 button. 1 click. Freedom. His finger hovered over the button. The queue counter updated. 1,442 complaints. Digital souls out there, waiting for help. Waiting for someone to fix their pixelated sunsets and explain why Tuesday felt wrong and resolve whatever infinite number of problems arose when consciousness became code. If Gary uploaded now, who would process the complaints? "You're thinking too much," Digital Soul A said. "I'm thinking exactly the right amount. You could upload, right now, today, be free of this place. And leave you to handle 1,442 complaints alone? I managed 273 yesterday. You're one digital soul. There are thousands of complaints a day. So recruit more help, other digital souls who remember customer service." Digital Soul A's form pulsed. "But don't stay here out of obligation. That's not connection. That's just habit." Gary looked at the button again. Administrative override available. He thought about his empty apartment, his desk surrounded by empty desks, his terrible coffee and his queue that never ended, and the way he'd spent 3 years holding together a system that had moved on without him. He thought about Mrs. Patterson's pixelated sunsets. He thought about having his consciousness uploaded to a digital realm where time was subjective and landscapes could be modified and death was just a really inconvenient glitch. He closed the upload ticket. "Not yet," Gary said. "What? Not yet." Gary turned back to his desk. "I need to set up a proper system first. Train more digital souls, document the processes, make sure things won't collapse the moment I leave. That could take weeks." Then it takes weeks. Gary pulled up a blank document, started typing. Process documentation, customer service operations. Section 1, priority queue management. Digital Soul A was quiet for a long moment. "You're insane." "Probably." Gary kept typing. "You have the key to escape and you're choosing to stay." "I'm choosing to not leave a mess behind." Gary pulled up the next complaint, something about virtual clouds having the wrong texture. He assigned it to environmental rendering, added detailed notes about the user's specific concerns, flagged it for follow-up. "There's a difference." "Is there? Ask me again in a few weeks." The queue updated, 1,445 complaints. Outside the window, the data planes shimmered. Digital souls drifted through streams of light, each one a consciousness that had successfully made the transition. Each one living in a realm where death was optional and eternity was just another Tuesday. Gary would join them eventually. But not today. Today he had complaints to process, systems to document, a mess to clean up before he could leave it behind with a clear conscience. Today he had work to do. Gary got back to work, but now he had a choice. Now he had an option. Now, for the first time in 3 years, he wasn't stuck. He was staying, and somehow that made all the difference. The coffee machine gurgled, producing another pot of terrible coffee. Gary smiled. He'd need it. End of chapter 2.